And the room gets so quiet. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Clean Energy Economy Minnesota's 2025 Legislative Preview event. My name is Gregg Mast, and I am the Executive Director of Clean Energy Economy Minnesota, or CEEM as we're known. And it's fantastic to see a packed room and so many of you here, along with all of those that are joining us online as we gear up for another pivotal legislative session for Minnesota's clean energy future. I'd also like to have all of you give yourselves an extra pat on the back for braving the Minnesota December winter. Hopefully the trek in was fairly smooth for everyone, and we will be having the coffee, teas, waters, and food will remain in the room for the duration. So please feel free to grab things as you would like. So don't hesitate to do that. And let's stay caffeinated, and it'll help keep us all warm together. So to begin, I'd like to extend a heartfelt thank you to our event sponsors, All Energy Solar, Evergreen Energy, Larkin Hoffman, and True North Solar. Your support makes it possible for us to come together to discuss the opportunities and challenges ahead as we work to grow a vibrant, clean energy economy across the state. I'd also like to extend a special thank you to our legislators who are on hand here today, who you'll hear from in just a bit, as well as Walker Orenstein from the Star Tribune, who is joining us for a second consecutive year to moderate the highly anticipated legislative panel discussion. I'd also like to extend a big thank you to Anna Johnson, Policy Advisor for Governor Walz and Lieutenant Governor Flanagan for joining us, and she's also in the room here today. I just saw Anna. Maybe you could give a quick wave. Thank you for being here, Anna. And I'd also like to extend a really big thank you to our McNamara Alumni Center support staff who are helping to ensure a very smooth event. So thank you again to the staff here at McNamara. And I'd also like to extend my deep gratitude to CEEM's Board of Directors. Several of our board members are here in attendance today, along with the CEEM staff. And then also I'd like to recognize two really special people. Tim Rudnicki, I know Tim is here in the room somewhere. There he is, along with Nicole Ramalingam. If Nicole's not already here, I know she's on her way. We're very grateful to have the privilege of working with Tim and Nicole on regulatory and policy priorities as well. It is truly an honor and a privilege to be in this work with all of you. So thank you for being here. As we conclude this election cycle, it's important to remember that clean energy is not and should not be a partisan issue. The benefits of clean energy transcend political boundaries. Today, Minnesota's power sector is already 54% carbon-free, and we must continue to act swiftly, with intention and determination, to unleash the economic benefits that accompany achieving our 100% clean energy by 2040 law. The economics are compelling, with clean energy driving job creation and economic growth. Clean energy strengthens our energy security and independence by maximizing the use of our local, homegrown energy resources and delivers significant cost savings for families and businesses alike. These are priorities that certainly resonate across the political spectrum. This past year has been marked by several significant accomplishments. Minnesota's clean energy workforce has grown to a new state record of over 62,000 jobs, surpassing pre-pandemic levels. And these jobs are growing 5 times faster than all other sectors of the state's economy. And nearly 40% of clean energy jobs are located in greater Minnesota. We've made big strides in permitting reform, streamlining processes to accelerate clean energy projects closer to the speed of business, while maintaining robust community engagement and environmental safeguards. Investments in transmission and energy storage are creating a more reliable and resilient grid that benefits all Minnesotans. However, as you all know, our work is far from done. As we look ahead to the 2025 legislative session, CEEM, along with our business members, will continue to focus on accelerating decarbonization across all sectors of our economy. This will require focus on items such as modernizing our energy and transportation infrastructure, expanding transmission capacity, slashing energy waste from our buildings, fostering clean energy innovation and entrepreneurship, and ensuring the benefits of the energy transition reach every community and citizen in our state. So in closing, today's event is designed to build on Minnesota's clean energy leadership and our momentum, providing you with a clearer picture of the road ahead. Now more than ever, state energy policy is going to be essential to enhancing Minnesota's attractiveness and competitiveness when it comes to retaining and growing clean energy business and driving our economy forward. We are thrilled to have an incredible lineup of legislators from both sides of the aisle that will be leading energy policy in Minnesota here today to explore the critical role of policymaking in shaping our energy future. The government has a role in determining the pace of our energy transition. But based on the strong economics and the business case, I was speaking about the business case with several of our members here earlier today, it's clear that clean energy is both the present and also the future. And it's just a matter of how quickly we can get to a fully decarbonized economy together. Thank you all again for taking the time to join us and for your commitment to building a cleaner, more reliable, and affordable energy system for all Minnesotans. It's now my pleasure to introduce someone who has been instrumental in helping Minnesota achieve its energy and climate goals, Assistant Commissioner and Chief of Staff at the Minnesota Department of Commerce, Hali Kolkind. At the department, Assistant Commissioner Kolkind oversees government affairs, communications, tribal affairs, diversity, equity, and inclusion, community engagement, and employee culture offices. She manages the department's strategic plan, continuous improvement efforts, and strategic initiatives, while serving as a chief advisor to the commissioner on agency operations and policy. She also previously served as senior policy advisor to the governor. Assistant Commissioner Kolkind's leadership has been pivotal in advancing policies that have positioned Minnesota as a clean energy leader. Today, she'll share her insights on the energy landscape and what's needed to maintain our momentum. Please join me in welcoming Assistant Commissioner Hali Kolkind.
Well, hello and welcome. Thank you for the warm welcome. It was good to see some familiar faces across the room, but also some new faces. It's been great to meet a couple of new folks around where I've heard your names, but maybe haven't interacted, but you've worked a lot with, obviously, our department. I am really excited that the Minnesota Department of Commerce was invited here to address the Clean Energy Economy Minnesota Legislative Preview. I am Assistant Commissioner Hali Kolkind and Chief of Staff. Our Commissioner Grace Arnold sends her greetings and regards for not being here today, as well as our leaders of the Energy Division, our Deputy Commissioner Pete Wyckoff, and Assistant Commissioners Lissa Polish and Sydney Lieb. Pete and Lissa are right now in Washington, D.C., meeting with officials at the Department of Energy, connecting with them on our many opportunities with federal funds and what we can do to bring those funds back here to Minnesota. As we look ahead to the 2025 legislative session, Commerce looks forward to working again with our chair in the Senate, Chair Frentz, and to work with also not one, but two chairs in the House. Congratulations to both Chair Acomb and Chair Swedzinski. We look forward to working with you all. As the Minnesota Department of Commerce, we are in the process right now in partnership with the governor in developing the policy and budget agenda for the 2025 legislative session. And we're also preparing for the year ahead and anticipated changes that we believe we'll see at the national level. Even with those anticipated changes, we continue to stay focused on our climate and clean energy policy and goals, looking to capitalize and capture as much federal funding as possible and bring it to our Minnesota economy. We will continue to move forward a clean energy system that will help grow our economy while also making sure it is equitable, affordable, and reliable. We remain committed to 100% carbon-free electricity by 2040 and to an economy that is net zero greenhouse gas emissions by the middle of the century. We believe that this is the right path to be on for our environment, our health, and importantly, Minnesota's pocketbooks. Minnesota's economic competitiveness depends on this. As a global clean energy transition is happening, we have an opportunity to strategically bring new business and quality jobs to Minnesota and the upper Midwest. Minnesota does not have any fossil fuels, but what we do have is wind, we have sun, and we have biomass, and we have the warmth of the ground beneath our feet, all of which can be utilized to provide low-cost, homegrown energy while building the economies in all corners of the state. We can use that clean energy to make things to sell to others, green iron and green steel, sustainable fuels for our planes, trucks, and ships, high-tech green products utilizing our education workforce. The possibilities are truly endless. In the past year, both Minnesota and federal policies have accelerated the drive towards cleaner, lower-cost energy generation. In 2023, the state took bold steps to help secure opportunities for federal funding, and in 2024, as Gregg mentioned, the state set a national example by moving to streamlining the process for permitting energy infrastructure in a way that preserves public input and engagement. Minnesota has been successful, wildly successful at this point in attracting federal money, and we continue to shore up those federal funds in the coming weeks and months ahead. Minnesota has already attracted more than 2.3 billion in recent federal clean energy grant funds and millions more in clean energy tax incentives. In addition, we anticipate additional awards to help defray the cost of electricity in rural Minnesota via federal grants to our rural electric cooperatives. At Commerce, we've been really proud to partner with Governor Walz, our legislature, other state agencies, and Minnesota businesses to bring that money back to the state in the form of federal energy investments. We will acknowledge and we know that there are likely changes ahead. Minnesota businesses, cities, and the state itself can and will continue to move forward. We will strive to work across both sides of the aisle and expect that bipartisan collaboration will be found. This work is about increasing our economic opportunity, a goal everybody here can support. We at Commerce look forward to working with the legislature and the clean energy business community in the 2025 legislative session and beyond. So we look forward to that work. That concludes my remarks for today. I know you've got a great agenda and lots of folks to hear from, so thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the Department of Commerce today.
Hey everyone, thanks for being here. I'm Walker Orenstein. I cover energy for the Star Tribune. We're now the Minnesota Star Tribune, if you haven't heard. Our snappy rebrand is here. I've been on this job for about a year. I covered the legislature at MinPost before that, and before that I was covering the legislature out in Washington State, and for the first time in like 10 legislative sessions, I'm seeing something totally new, which is a tie. Tie in the state house. Republicans, of course, won a split in the state house this November, taking total control away from the DFL, making Representative Swedzinski co-chair in the House. So that should be interesting to see exactly how a tie is going to work. However, the logistics shake out. This year is certainly going to take a new direction. DFL lawmakers and the governor approved major changes to our energy system, of course, over the last couple of years. There was the carbon-free by 2040 law, the permit reforms meant to speed up wind, solar, and transmission. So, now we're going to have a potentially new direction. Also federally, instead of Governor Tim Walz's vision here in Minnesota kind of setting the tone maybe nationally, instead the national tone might be more similar to the vision of Governor Doug Burgum over in North Dakota. So a different landscape for sure. So this is happening as our electric grid and utility companies are facing this dizzying array of complicated challenges. We've got the ongoing transition from coal and gas, but then we've also got to meet potentially a gigantic rise in demand from the electrification of cars and appliances, but also data centers built by our giant tech companies. So anyway, it should be a very interesting session. I want to welcome our lawmakers to the stage if they don't mind coming up. We've got Senator Nick Frentz from North Mankato. Representative Patty Acomb from Minnetonka, and Representative Chris Swedzinski from Ghent. All right. You all ready? So, we do have this interesting situation in the State House, kind of a mixed bag for both parties in the state elections this year, but for Republicans, it was certainly a victory in the House. Can we start with you, Representative Swedzinski? I want to ask this of all of you, but what message do you think voters sent about our energy system in this election, and how does that inform kind of what you want to do as co-chair of the House Energy Committee?
Well, I think, thank you, by the way, thank you for this good organization for the invitation to come this morning. Thank you for taking time out of your days to come, and thank you for the question. It's really unique. You think about an election here in the state of Minnesota. Here we had the top of the ticket nationally as our governor, Tim Walz, and it was even rejected by legislative races within the state of Minnesota. So not only did they lose their California-centric message nationally, but they essentially lost control of one house of the legislature with the top of the ticket as governor of Minnesota. And while what things that you may look at as victories, I think general population view it as potentially very risky when it comes to policy decisions made in the state of Minnesota. And I think they spoke with that. It might be a slight change, but definitely change to have more than one voice represented at the Capitol, and we hope to do that. So I think that's really, when it comes to policy spectrum-wide, that is pretty deep when you think about that. You think of any other state, any other choice. Tim Walz was the choice on a national ticket, and it was rejected nationally, and at least in part shake, rejected at the state level by the legislature switching, or at least coming to a tie. So.
And is there anything that you take out of as like a concrete kind of policy direction from that for energy in particular?
Well, I think, in general, I think we need to look at, from a reliability standpoint, from a cost standpoint, you look at most business. You look at Cargill, for instance. We were just chatting about that on the walk-in. They're eliminating 8,000 jobs. And what other industries are doing that? From a competitive nature, from an international standpoint, what makes good for a talking point to get on a national ticket isn't necessarily a good talking point when it comes to actual job creation, actual ability to compete, actual ability to do the job necessary nationally and internationally. We live in a very dynamic, changing world. You look at, literally it's exploding across the globe. From an international relations standpoint, whether it be between Southeast Asia, whether it be martial law in South Korea, whether it be issues in Israel and Palestine, all the rest. We've got issues that are absolutely exploding. And one of the biggest things that we can be doing is having a calming effect when it comes to policies, when it comes to cost, when it comes to families in Minnesota. And that's our goal. And I think most folks would say that their energy bills are too high, the cost of energy is too high, the cost of gasoline is too high, and they've run out of pay before they've run out of month. And I think that was what the voters talked about. And you can do that either through federal programs. It was talked about by the assistant commissioner that there's going to be federal programs that comes in to help lower the cost of energy for average everyday people. It's not through policy, it's through writing checks to people. And as this national administration works to balance the budget, hopefully, that would be my dream of what they do, is drastically reduce the size of the federal government so it gets out of our everyday single lives and it allows businesses and families to thrive on their own without government intervention, that we also balance the budget and have a strong dollar policy where the dollar increases in strength. And I think that's really the future of our nation at where it needs to go, that this policy of a continuing lessening of value when it comes to the dollar's value internationally needs to stop, and we need to grow the strength for the U.S. people and for a U.S. dollar.
Thank you. Representative Acomb, what message did you take from voters on energy, and how does that inform what you hope to do this year at the Capitol?
Well, thank you Walker, and thanks. This is on, right? Can you hear me?
Just get a little closer, maybe.
Thanks for having us here today. It's always fun to come to the university, and especially for this event. So thanks for being here, and thanks for inviting me to join you. As far as what I think the election, first I'll say I'm a little tired of historic legislative sessions. We've had several of them back to back, so I'm a little, PTSD for that. But I think as far as the election, my takeaway from the election might be a little bit different than Representative Swedzinski. And while I think that how Minnesota fared compared to how Democrats fared across the country is very different. I think Minnesota did much better, the Democrats in Minnesota did much better than many other places around the country. And so while maybe the DFL did not win the House, we didn't lose it either.
That's true.
And so I think that it gives us a great opportunity to be able to work together. And I think Representative Swedzinski and I have served on the Energy Committee together for the last 6 years. And so we have always enjoyed, I think, a respectful and not always agreeing
That's okay.
relationship, but we've always worked well together. And I think that there's a real opportunity for us to find some bipartisan paths forward today. I think we all can agree that we want to make energy more affordable, and that's really been much of the reason that we have been pushing for the 100% clean energy bill. We know that the cheapest form of new energy is clean, renewable energy. And so as we continue to decarbonize, as we continue to grow that, I think that and looking for energy efficiency are ways that we can help to lower people's energy bills. And so I think I look for this session, and I think that there's, wants and needs, and we need to pass a budget. And so we're goal number one, project number one. And beyond that, I'm open to working with Representative Swedzinski and our colleagues on the committee, as well as the Senate, to determine what that might be.
Senator Frentz?
Thanks, Walker. And first of all, thanks to CEEM. Thanks to all of you for the work that you do, for the jobs you provide, for the taxes that you pay. I'm probably going to go a little bit more narrow focus on the election results, but glad to see Minnesota voters had a choice whether to have Democrats in charge of the Minnesota Senate or Republicans, and they chose Democrats. So that's on us. I think another message for Democrats is more outside of the energy jurisdiction. I'm proud to serve as the chair of the Senate Energy Committee. I'm going to be serving as the chair of the Pension Commission also, so I'll be busy. And as Assistant Majority Leader, I just want to say thanks for everything that you do. Thanks for this forum. And as a business owner myself, I'm assuming you're coming here for the obvious combination of doing good for our state and our country and making a profit and providing jobs. And I'm all in for that. On the energy front, I think you have an opening here, and I'll tell you why I think legislators had better listen. Through 2 years as the energy chair, serving with Republicans and Democrats, I have yet to hear the Republican response to climate change. And I didn't hear one in the opening remarks, Representative, but I would like to know what the Republican thoughts are. If you're following what's going on at the COP meetings, we have a national and international crisis, and nations around the world are asking developed nations, that's a euphemism for us, to put up $1.3 trillion. Are you interested in your pocketbooks? Well, you better ask what that number is going to be a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And in those other countries, they're not talking about whether this program raises the price of solar 4 cents. They're talking about, is this island nation going to be wiped out in their children's lifetime? And so we need both parties to come to the table and say, here's what we believe about climate change. Unfortunately, the news is not good. However, that is where CEEM members have the most to offer, and I think voters are waking up to that. By the way, the response of developed nations, that's us, is, well, we don't have your 1.3 trillion. We have 300 billion every year, which sounds like a lot of money, but clearly is not enough. Where do you think those nations and our partners around the globe are going to look to when those numbers go up? And that's before you ask yourself, what is the cost we're paying every year in property damage from climate-related storms? I believe it's about $450 billion. One thing I'm surprised by is that Americans aren't asking a little bit more about why the price of their homeowners insurance is tripling. Part of the reason is these large companies are getting slaughtered by these once-in-a-lifetime events that happen 2 or 3 times a year. I believe Hurricane Milton is now $52 billion. One storm, ladies and gentlemen. So as we look at the Minnesota legislature, we have to look out for Minnesotans. But as we have a shared interest with the rest of the country and the rest of the world, we're going to have to come to an agreement. I hope we can, Representative Swedzinski, on the cost of climate change if we don't do something. And as far as the budget and policy, I would characterize the House and Senate this way. Typically, the Senate Energy Committee has been a little bit more moderate on some of its energy policy than the House. That's fine to the extent that Republicans and Democrats will now be producing the House position. I think that's fine. I think Minnesotans did ask for a little more balance, and we'll come together in conference committee and hopefully work something out that'll make sense for you and for your businesses and for your families.
Affordability certainly does seem to be a theme, and here, at least with our electric bills, our major utilities tend to be below the average, the national average, at least in bills. However, bills are definitely going up. I mean, I keep writing about rate cases over and over and over again, and often utilities will ask for a lot and they'll only get some, but it's still going up. What does addressing affordability look like at the legislature? Like how can you actually make a concrete difference? I know you touched on some of these things, but for you in this legislative session, how can you actually bring costs down specifically? Let's start with you, Representative Swedzinski.
Sure. Well, I think one of the first things we can do from an affordability standpoint is look at how does the legislature actually add to the cost of electricity in the state of Minnesota. And one of the primary areas that we do is through taxation. And so we have the tax on cast storage at our nuclear plants, which is $350,001 of our facilities, and I think $500,000 a piece on the other. Equates to about $30 or $50 million a year. I think that would be a great way to maybe bipartisanly look at what the legislature can directly do to lessen the cost of electricity on both business and families when it comes to the cost, and that'd be the elimination of the tax on those casks for cask storage at our 2 nuclear facilities, which would save ratepayers about $30 to $50 million per year. And so that would be our first walk out of the gate. I think that would be a good bipartisan way to say, hey, let's just get rid of taxes that are taxing electricity so that those savings can be passed down to the consumer.
Representative Acomb?
I think that I certainly think affordability is an important issue, and as far as the renewable development account, I think that if we recall, that account was developed to work on innovative ways to replace nuclear energy because of the risks to our state for nuclear energy. So I think that the renewable development account has been an effective way for us to leverage those kinds of new innovations and technologies to help reduce costs. There's a plethora of programs that have been established over the many years and ways that that fund has been used to help local units of government, school districts, to help reduce energy burden. So I think that continuing to look at those kinds of things. I will say I have solar panels on my house. I drive an electric car. I just installed an air source heat pump. And there are a lot of ways that we as energy consumers can reduce our need to buy more energy from our utilities, therefore reducing our costs. So I think energy efficiency is an important program. I think that we need to be ensuring that we are working hard to ensure that that is being done equitably across our state and throughout all of our communities. It shouldn't be just people in the suburbs who are able to afford solar panels that are benefiting from having a cleaner source of energy and the reduced energy bills that we pay. So working to ensure that that's happening in an equitable way is going to be a priority to me.
Senator Frentz?
Well, first of all, in my experience, and I served as the ranking minority member before I became the chair, the best ideas come from the public, and we're here in a room full of all of you. So the ideas that you bring forward about how to lower ratepayer costs, the innovation that your companies produce, we're looking forward to hearing from you. Point of personal privilege for a moment, which is what senators say when they want everyone to stop what they're doing and let us speak. This gentleman, Tyler, could you raise your hand, please? This is Tyler Klein. No applause necessary, but glad to introduce Tyler. He is the new committee administrator for the Senate Energy, Utilities, Climate. And as all co-workers, I like to try to embarrass him wherever I can. We ran an incredibly thorough search for the next Energy CA. It is a critical job, as many of you know. He's replacing Justin Emmerich, who also did a great job, and out of about, I don't want to exaggerate, 100,000 applications and about 250 interviews, Tyler came out on top, and I'm proud to serve with him. My point in identifying Tyler for you is that's the kind of person you can bounce your ideas off. That's the type of person that a CEEM member can say, well, this program could be more efficient. And one of the words I think Representative Swedzinski, we're going to agree on is efficiency. Just like your companies are always asking, what can they do more efficiently? Where can we save our customers money? The government has to do that too. I'm encouraged by some of the Senate Democrats' discussion in the last few days about efficiency. Your government has to keep looking. Doesn't mean we change everything. It just means you have to be willing to have that conversation. And in energy, there are programs that could be done differently. I will say, of our efficiency programs in Minnesota, I kind of like them. I kind of like the way we do SIP. I kind of like the way we incentivize efficiency, and I think we want to continue to look at that. My guess is there won't be some massive new proposal out of the Senate this year in energy, but for costs, I think the simple ways are still the best, and I like to pitch the 100% clean energy bill, which, as many of you know, I was a proud chief author of. It does not prescribe that Minnesota get to its clean energy goals by saying we have 9% of solar and 13% of wind. And it says, let's go to the cleanest, most affordable, most reliable energy for 2040. And we don't know what that is. And you and your members are able to inform us to say, hey, this technology is working. And I think some of those innovations are starting to bear fruit in energy storage, but I'm guessing that's a different question.
So I wanted to talk about data centers. I feel like it's all anybody talks about in some ways right now in the energy world, or at least it's a lot of what I read about, and sometimes a lot of what I write about. And we've got Amazon, Microsoft, and Meta likely coming to the region with Xcel. The PUC, the Public Utilities Commission, had a hearing the other month where Xcel said they expect roughly 1,000 megawatts of data centers in the next 5 to 7 years, and the same for Great River Energy. I'll borrow some math from the vice chair of the PUC there. 2,000 megawatts would be somewhere in the neighborhood of the energy use of 1.6 million homes. So it's a lot. If that actually materializes. That's quite a challenge. It's also potentially an economic opportunity. And I wanted to ask you all, just generally, do you think that these data centers are a good thing or a bad thing for Minnesota and for utility customers? Do you think the legislature should do anything to encourage them or to incent them to come here? Or do you think that the legislature should do anything to kind of regulate them or restrict them in any way? And what would that look like? And maybe we'll start with Senator Frentz. We'll switch up the order.
Thanks, Walker. Yeah, I like this discussion because part of our claim, and this helps all of you, is that demand is going to go up, maybe way up in Minnesota in the next 15 years. And data centers are usually in the first sentence after we discuss that. Having said that, as we watch the state's development of their own data center policy, state of Washington comes to mind. There was a time when they were incentivized by the host state to the extent that I don't think we're going to see anymore. I think it's a discussion of a new business coming here. I like that part. They create good jobs. I like that part. But I think they'll put up some of the infrastructure and incentivize their role here. And I think it's driven actually by the consumers. This artificial intelligence is a consumer demand. And if you know anything about Americans, they're going to get their consumer preferences treated with their pocketbooks. So I think we'll see continued data center deployment with the data centers and their large, wealthy purveyors offering, I don't know, maybe $1-2 billion of infrastructure to us. That'll be a relationship we can live with. On the regulatory side, I think there's a little bit of clean water concern, but I don't see heavy regulation at all. And I would characterize Minnesota as open for business without having to roll out red carpet financial incentives. That's my best guess.
Representative Acomb.
Thank you. This is a topic that came up quite a bit last session and certainly has raised some red flags for me as we are looking to reach our 100% clean energy goals. With the increased demand, it can certainly force or encourage continuation or even new development of fossil fuel infrastructure. And so I find that concerning. I think that we need to be careful about how we welcome these organizations to our state and the benefit, recognizing the benefit that they bring. I do think there's an opportunity. Many of the larger data centers share Minnesota's desire for clean energy and being carbon neutral. And so I think that's a good thing. I think that there's some opportunities there for working together to ensure we do reach those clean energy goals that we have. I think that there's also potentially other opportunities. The conversations, I really appreciated the hearing that the Public Utility Commission held. I attended and learned a lot about many of the different stakeholders that were presenting that day. I do think the water issue is one that needs to be looked at to ensure that we are protecting our water here in Minnesota. And so I don't know what the landscape should look like, but I think we need to be careful, and I think we need to make sure that there are some maybe guardrails or at least some guidance about where they're going, making sure it's not interrupting some of the transmission needs that we already have, and so making sure we're looking at all the impacts that it'll bring to our state.
And just briefly, do you have any specifics on what you think those guidelines or regulations might look like?
Well, I think, I don't know specifically. I will say I'm interested in meeting with some of the data centers to talk with them a little bit about what some of the requirements are that they need. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert because I'm not. But I would like to learn more about what they need and why they need to be located where they are, their wants, their needs, so that we can understand where the benefits are for Minnesotans.
Representative Swedzinski.
Sure. Well, I think, obviously, if you look at, I think Wayne Gretzky said it best. He said what made him great at hockey is that he didn't skate to where the puck was, but where it's going to be. And when it comes to, the digital economy, the hosting these, digital data centers and the rest, whether it's an institution like the University of Minnesota or MnSCU or business in general, where the puck is going when it comes to education is not bricks and mortar, but it is going digital. When it comes to our businesses that are, international or just regional, it's digital. It's manufacturing, but it's also what is hosting that crossways, that interconnection of our future economy, whether it's AI and the rest. And so, I feel like we have an opportunity in Minnesota to make ourselves as efficient as possible. I think we can open them with open arms and welcome them into our state. I'm not concerned. If you look at the potential that they're going to use the same consumption of 1.6 million homes when it comes to distribution of costs for infrastructure maintenance, having that many extra hands on deck to do that for our state is going to be a good thing. Ultimately, what they're reliant on and why they're probably building in the area that they're looking at purchasing, where they purchased a lot of ground already, is base load energy. That's why they're building there, and we need to support it.
Senator Frentz wanted to add something.
I'm sorry. I hate to jump in and compliment Representative Swedzinski on this point, but you are exactly right. And if we're talking about costs, we have to accept that the scale of this potentially produces benefits for our ratepayers, potentially. And I thought the all hands on deck, that's an upside for us. And Minnesota ratepayers mostly don't know the name of their state senator. They don't care. They know their electric bill at the end of the month. And so I do think that's a fair point. I'm not positive how it plays out, but that is a selling point for the data centers is, look, if we add this much, the capacity, the ability to benefit from economies of scale. And I think it's a very fair point. I promise no further compliments for Representative Swedzinski.
No, we're fine. You don't have to promise anything.
We'll see.
Representative Swedzinski, sorry if you mentioned this, but specifically, would you want to incentivize them any further? Do you think that there is anything that Minnesota should do additionally to encourage them?
Well, I've always believed that, you need to incentivize something if it's needed, right? And, if we truly believe that it's a battle between us and another state to actually get them or not, I don't know the landscape that well. You know, it's my understanding that a vast majority of property has been purchased already by some of these, 300 some acres, 500 acres, 600 acres in some cases. You know, if they're already willing to make an investment in infrastructure and do the job on their own, I'm more than happy to allow them to do it on their own. But if it does come to it's between us and another state, then we need to look at that. And I don't know the landscape, but I certainly don't want to disincentivize them. And sometimes that can be viewed as a two-edged sword. So, you know, one state's incentivization or region's incentivization, that, you know the word I'm trying to say, and is another state's the other side. So.
I'm glad you mentioned baseload power.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk nuclear. I'm going to direct this first to Representative Acomb. You're a bit outnumbered on this issue, or, you know.
I don't know that I believe that, but that's okay.
Well, at least on this stage, maybe.
Okay, maybe.
Well, okay. So more Democrats across the country are embracing nuclear energy, and one example is the Biden administration. They want to triple nuclear capacity by 2050. Obviously, they won't be in power anymore, and nevertheless, that's a goal. But we've seen nuclear plants reopen to feed these data centers, even tech companies working to advance, you know, unproven but promising smaller nuclear reactors in ways that can pick up the cost for ratepayers, even in some cases. You've been, House defellers, I guess, have been reticent to allow kind of even a study of these new technologies compared to legislative Republicans and Senate defellers, and the governor, who are all more bullish on the idea. Has your view on this evolved at all? Kind of what is your current thinking? Do you think that your caucus is, I guess, behind the times compared to those other folks who believe in this?
I guess we're old-fashioned, but we remember the problems that nuclear energy can bring. And so I think it may be carbon-free, but by no means is it clean. And so there is a lot of nuclear waste that comes with it, and there's no way to handle that. Right now, where it's stored is in compromising positions to some of our neighbors in Minnesota. So I think it's really important that we not forget the risks that come with nuclear. We've seen that both of our nuclear plants have had issues over the last couple of years with contamination on site, contaminating water. So I think that as we look forward to what's on the horizon, I certainly am hearing interest about modular nuclear, certainly hearing it from our utilities. I will also say there is a lot of concern and from colleagues in my caucus that are like, wait a minute, we've talked about nuclear for a long time. We have a moratorium in Minnesota because of the risks. Am I ready to lift the moratorium? No, I'm not personally, but that doesn't mean I'm not open to conversations about what we can do to look at and consider nuclear going forward.
Representative Swedzinski, can you give us just your general view, or should we be lifting the nuclear moratorium?
Can I just pass on one other,
Of course, yes.
And we often talk about nuclear and it's carbon-free, and let's not also forget it's the most expensive form of new generation today. And so as we're talking about reducing costs and reducing cost to consumer, nuclear does not fall in line with that. So let's just remember, if we're having the conversation about affordability and cost to consumers, this is in contrast to that.
And so, Representative Swedzinski, just generally your view on lifting the nuclear moratorium, if you're in favor of it, can you address, like, are you hopeful that we would build in this state the type of really large nuclear reactors that have seen some of the cost overruns, and even the smaller ones have had some cost issues? But generally, are you looking at hoping for really big ones, really small ones, mix of the two? What's your general sense of this issue?
You know, I think, it's not necessarily what we wish for or what we hope for. I think when you look at a moratorium, that is a pretty firm no when it comes to what is the planning, what is the possibility. We've given money to institutions within the state to actually do studies within the nuclear realm on how the reactors work. You know, how do we gain form and function when it comes to how that they would potentially be deployed, when it especially comes to the small nuclear plants that would be, movable, on a semi-truck. I think that would be at least a first step, right? I mean, if you're talking a large one, the time of development is I think 10 or 20 years. I mean, it's not a short period of time. But, again, where is the puck going? And if the puck is indeed going to a carbon-free system nationally, then if the technology exists, we should at least be open to it. And by saying no, what we run the risk of is that if we believe that energy is also economic opportunity, and development is also economic opportunity, by simply having a no, what we run the risk of, because we have a grid and we have a system that runs between states, that if another state is more readily and more friendly, and we simply have a no, that development will happen across the state line by 30 feet. Right? And so if our goal is that we believe that we can manage those resources, if our goal is that we can manage the technology better than other states, then we should have a mat that is open to the potential of the development of the technology, which should be lifting the moratorium. So that if we believe we do things better in Minnesota, which I believe we do in certain areas, that we should make sure that that nuclear plant, when it's built, because it will be, it's not 30 feet on the other side of a state line, just so that we can feel better about ourselves. And I think that's what I fear, is that when you have a general moratorium on a technology that is, quite frankly, widely used nationally and growing exponentially internationally, that if we shut the door to it as a state, as an economy, that we are going to be sticking our own foot not in the door but in our mouths. And I think we can at least have a conversation about it. So,
Senator Frentz, you have passed a study, I think the last couple of sessions at least. If it is a 10 to 20 year lead time to develop one of these, and you believe that that's a potentially necessary thing, why spend a couple years studying something? Why not let the utilities have at it if they want it?
Sure. Well, it's no secret the Senate Energy Committee passed unanimously, and by that I mean all 13 members, the largest committee in the Senate, all Republicans and all Democrats voted yes on the advanced nuclear study, which is a slower route, but that was our attempt to have this discussion. I think you'll see a discussion. I think it'll come, if nowhere else, from Senator Andrew Matthews, who's the ranking minority member on the Senate Energy Committee, and he's appeared with me at some events this year already. He says we're going to be proposing a full repeal of the nuclear moratorium. I am the one who runs around saying these technologies must compete with each other if they're carbon-free on cost and reliability. Nuclear's got some advantages on reliability. It's true, there are some cost questions, and most of you are familiar with the cost overruns for trying to build legacy nuclear down in Georgia. However, simply saying no deprives our businesses, deprives our utilities, deprives our ratepayers of any benefit that we might come up with in a year or 5 years or 10 years. And so I think a better approach is to acknowledge the cost issues and take a look. And it's also clear that there's a greater public concern about legacy nuclear than small modular nuclear, which after all has been powering submarines for us for about half a century. And we have a number of places that are saying, what is the reason that we can't deploy small nuclear in this situation? And I think as state government, the question becomes, are we certain that there's no risk-balanced approach to nuclear anywhere in the state? We just can't deploy small modular nuclear. There's no way it's ever going to work in any application. And I think the answer is probably no. That's why I support the study. As far as a full repeal of the moratorium, I think the waste is a good point. All of our energy generation carries risks. We've got environmental risk, we have cost risk, we have risk to public safety, and we'll have to balance those. And as I've said before, the toughest part of being a legislator is saying no to your friends. And so we're going to have to ask ourselves, are we really in this for the people of Minnesota, including those that just want affordable, reliable, clean electricity?
Representative Swedzinski, I read in the Marshall newspaper that you oppose Xcel Energy's transmission line, the one that would run from Sherburne County to Lyon County. It seemed like there was considerable local opposition to that as well. That project is really aimed at carrying renewable power long distances to help replace Xcel's retiring coal plants. You talked about, you thought it was a mistake, or at least you were quoted as such, thought it was a mistake to retire those plants. utilities are working to build tons of these transmission lines, basically, and additional renewable power. Two questions for you on that. I kind of wondered, like, is it possible to kind of put the genie back in the bottle on that one? Do you think that it's possible for the legislature to kind of do anything to, I guess, extend the life of coal in the state, and should they? And then two, like, nearly all of this power infrastructure that's being built, a gigantic amount, is going in greater Minnesota, sometimes with a lot of local opposition. What do you think can developers and utilities do to sort of, I guess, convince or win over people, or to make them more comfortable with some of these projects as they're built at an increasingly rapid pace in greater Minnesota?
Sure. Well, I think, that's one of the big concerns, and that was a meeting that was held in Marshall. And, the general feeling is, you have a choice as long as you generally agree where it's going to go. And I think, when you look at right-of-way, and you look at intimate domain, that's really where the conversation happens, right? When it comes to basic utilities, if you're the belief that we have a system that's already been developed, we already have core centers of distribution, so we have Becker, we have Monticello, we have across state lines with other coal plants as well. What part do we play in a technology we don't necessarily agree with? And a lot of the folks that were in that meeting are very concerned that they have a choice, but they really don't. That the line is coming, whether they want it or not. And, the development of wind, the development of solar, the rest, it's awfully good if it happens to be on your land and you don't live near it. It's awfully stinky when you're not profiting from it. You have to look at it, and every sunset is blinking lights. And, I think that's one of the unique things. It has its benefits, but also drawbacks, right? And when it comes to, the coal and the rest, I think, quite frankly, demand is going to take care of that on its own. You look at internationally, I think, what do we have? We have 187 gigawatts of coal electricity in the United States. Currently under development, we have over 600 gigawatts of coal development globally. I think just actually within a couple of countries, China and India. So when we're being told that, one, hey, we need to get rid of our coal in the U.S. so that we don't have bad storms, do you think that's going to stop a storm? When we literally have 3 times the capacity being built internationally than we have in the U.S.? So then it becomes a point of competition. Where do we stand internationally from a form of competition within business, within a regulatory environment, within a business environment, with a tax environment, to get manufacturing, to get job growth, to get young people, to get investment? Those are the real questions. And so when we're told at the legislature, well, hey, we need to stop burning coal so that we won't have bad storms in Florida, and 3 times is being built internationally with our competitors, not our enemies, our competitors, when it comes to business and economic development, where is the puck going? That's all I'm saying. So,
Senator Frentz, I wanted to let you touch on this too. You obviously are in a greater Minnesota district as well. You can respond however you'd like, or just also what can developers and utilities do to win hearts and minds in places where there might be skepticism?
Well, first of all, I said I wasn't going to compliment you again, but you got backbone promoting coal to CEEM. I give you credit for it, seriously. I think we had the Huntley-Wilmarth line, a similar situation where the local landowners had concerns, and not in my backyard as a phenomenon all of us are familiar with, and eventually it got built. But it's true that landowners have a concern when you talk about bringing transmission right through their backyard. And as a greater Minnesota legislator, we have about 2,000 farms in my district. Some of these families have been on that land 100, 150 years. So land issues just a little bit touchier. Having said that, I think coal is on the way out generally because of the cost. And I think if you look at some of the wind, unsubsidized wind out of Buffalo Ridge in Minnesota, it's just way cheaper. We will have to deal with eminent domain. That has always been a touchy issue in our country, and it will always be a touchy issue. But I think we want to deploy the cleanest resources. And I would again pose the question for all of you and for us three as well. What is the cost that we attach to climate change? You're allowed to say there is no cost. We simply want to go right now for whatever technology, regardless of its ability to heat up our planet. You could say the cost is tremendous. We simply cannot have any carbon emitting resources of any kind. Let's close every quick trip tomorrow and pull up every gas pump. I think the best answer for our country and for our planet's in between those two. I tend to feel that climate change, when it incorporates our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, is pretty high cost, and we should be working towards clean, renewable, and hopefully affordable and reliable energy. So that would be, how I see it. We'll continue, 100 years from now, when we put transmission through, we will still have families who say, hey, that sucks when you put that on my land. That will not change. But it turns out we got a bunch of human beings on the planet, and there's some other stuff that we're not going to change about our personalities and shortcomings either, but that's a different panel.
Okay, I want to do one really quick question, if you all can answer really fast, before we get to audience questions. The Inflation Reduction Act, we don't really know the future of it over in Congress. Incoming President Donald Trump has said he wants to cut it, but legislative Republicans, congressional Republicans are it's a little less certain kind of how that's going to play out. However you feel about it, the local utilities here are kind of penciling in that money, tax breaks and things, and everyone from XL to our rural electric cooperatives are talking about how this, they feel like, will lower costs, especially in a state where moving to the 2040, carbon-free isn't an option at this point in state law. So I just wanted to ask just generally your view on what Congress should do with the IRA, but also just should the legislature do anything to, I don't know, can you or should you do anything if things get cut to kind of replicate that or affect that? I realize that the scale of money at play is quite large, but how would you address that as a lawmaker if they start to get rid of some of those pieces? And since I skipped you, Representative Acomb, maybe we'll start with you.
Well, I think the Inflation Reduction Act has been an incredible opportunity for Minnesota and other states around the country to partner with the federal government to achieve our clean energy goals. And we heard earlier today that Minnesota has benefited with billions of dollars of input from the IRA to help reach goals, to help our co-ops and our munis achieve the 100% clean energy goals that we have. And so after the election and hearing some of what President Trump had said on the campaign trail, after the election I reached out to Pete Wyckoff at the Department of Commerce to ask specifically, how does Minnesota sit? Where do we need to be concerned? And I think it's not 100% clear yet, and I think there's still things that are being developed here at the tail end of President Biden's administration. So I think that it's been a great 2 years being able to work and partner with the federal government, and I'm hopeful that because of the input from congressional Republicans that these opportunities aren't going to fully go away. I'm not counting on it or holding my breath, but I think that the pressure from the Republicans will be, I hope, felt by President Trump to not get rid of all of the opportunities there. It's doing amazing things to help reduce recognizing the impacts of climate change across our country. So I'm not sure what we can do. I'm not sure what it will do to Minnesota if it goes away, but certainly a topic that I'm paying close attention to.
Representative Swedzinski.
Who knows? I would probably venture on the side of, I think if the president lives to his promise of trying to eliminate $2 trillion from the budget, my guess is this would be probably in the top 80% tile of for things to go. And it didn't work. I mean, we still have inflation, so.
Senator Frentz.
I think we'll see some tinkering with the IRA, but my favorite headline last week was the Wall Street Journal. I'm paraphrasing. Trump plans to undermine IRA opposed by GOP legislators. And to their credit, Republican-led states have benefited from the IRA and that money and their jobs and their clean energy, and I think that will be the counterweight. I love it in the same way I love the occasional Democrat who pushes back on their own party. I love the checks and balances, and that's what I think you'll see.
All right, audience questions time. People want to raise their hands, and microphones will find you.
Hi, my name is Tina Munson. I am on the CEEM board, so this is very exciting. I love this event, but also I am a local council member, and I know you all probably recognize me from the last session, but I think there was only one comment about working with local government units this morning, and so my question is really around how do you see working with the local governments, because we do a lot on trying to help reduce energy costs, reduce the energy burdens, and there are some programs, but do you have ideas of how you can continue to work and support local governments in those efforts?
Sure. I think one of the areas that we've heard concern about is once a project hits a certain size, that local governments are a little bit kind of out of the loop because then it gets bumped up to the state level. And it would be my hope that, from a siting standpoint, whether it be solar setbacks, solar restrictions, or closeness, whatever it might be, that we would take more account into what local elected officials have to say. So if they want to have an ordinance that protects rural residences from encroachment from these developments, that those are followed, not just from state guidelines, but from a locality standpoint, I think would be important. That would be one way to empower local units of government. And then also if there's local bans too. So if there's a county board that doesn't want the development within their county, or the transmission lines because of that we would allow those local unit governments to have voice into those areas too, or townships.
I will just say, I think that working in partnership with local units of government is a real opportunity. We can do more when we're working together, and so I think, the wonderful work that is going on at the ammunition site and the look at trying to utilize and recognize the benefits of network geothermal, for example. I think that there's a real opportunity for state, county, and city governments to all work together to achieve our shared goals. And I think we can do that better if we're working in concert. And so I think I welcome, as a former city council member myself, I see the value in working directly with local units of government to achieve our shared goals.
I echo both of my colleagues. I think the partnerships that we make with local government bear a lot of the fruit. I would say just keep in mind that the utilities are granted monopolies, and with the geographic territories that they cover, that sometimes creates questions whether we can have individual local governments creating a sort of a patchwork. I think the energy policy is best set in St. Paul and in Washington, D.C. Lord help me for saying that. And therefore, I think once local governments know that we want a partnership, once they see that there are some things we can't do if we want to honor the letter and the spirit of our monopoly agreements, I think we'll do fine. And I think local governments have an even greater responsibility to ask, what is the cost impact of this program plan on our residents, and to look at it through that local lens. And I think those voices bubble up. As you know, Minnesota cities have a good voice at the Capitol, and I hope that continues. Looking forward to working together.
My name is Mark Spur. I'm here from FEB Energy and also on behalf of Citizens Climate Lobby. And I'd like to make a comment and then ask a question. The comment relates to some things that Nick said earlier about the costs of climate change, about the cost of not addressing climate change. And in Minnesota here, we're relatively lucky, knock on wood, regarding the property damage caused by climate change. Other states, like famously Florida, and California, not so much. The state of Florida is the biggest insurer in the state now. They're the insurer of last resort. And I believe, in my crystal ball, that we will reach a crisis in the property insurance industry, and they will come to the government, as they already have in Florida, and eventually they'll come to the Minnesota government, they will come to the US government and say, we're too big to fail. We can't afford this anymore. You need to take over. So my question, and it particularly for Representative Swedzinski, is if and when that happens,
sure,
would you finally think maybe climate change is something we need to do something about?
Well, I think your question is unique in the fact that like we said, so if you burn coal in North Dakota or in Minnesota, or you put that exact same coal on a train and ship it across the country, then put it on a boat and burn it in Southeast Asia, does it get burnt? So it's not a question whether or not we can do anything about it, it's whether we can do anything about it. And I think
everybody has that attitude, then we're.
But I'm just saying, right? Like, what did I say? Because guess what? When you eliminate a need for a product, which that's essentially what the carbon-free bill did for 2020, whatever it is, in a couple years, we're not going to burn coal, right? North Dakota's probably not going to burn coal. Do you think that coal is not going to get mined legitimately? I'm just saying that it will get mined and it will get burnt. It just won't get burnt here. And so that's just a reality. And so you can make the argument that we need to pass this bill or do this or do that, but why don't we try to burn it as clean as we possibly can here and create a demand for it here rather than put it on a train, put it on a boat, and then it's out of our hands and we don't see it.
Just think of it this way. If we were on a lifeboat and it was sinking,
Sure.
and what that requires is that everybody bails out the boat, but you're going to look at it and say, well, we're sunk. I'm not going to bail because other people will do it. I think we need to consider that although the international negotiations regarding climate change are very fraught and very difficult and very challenging, ultimately, just like with the Montreal Protocol for ozone, push will come to shove and we're going to have to do something together. And I think the U.S. needs to step up.
And if you want to respond to that briefly, that's great, but then we want to make sure we get to other questions too. Yeah.
Sure.
Any other questions?
I think we have some few online questions, but
am I going?
You're rolling.
So Greg, Jason, I also volunteer with the same group Mark does. So Walter, thank you for the question on the nuclear moratorium. That was actually going to be my question, so I'll change it a bit here. There's been a series of advancements just over the last 3 months with both the White House report, there's another one at the state agency level talking about the industrial use case for nuclear energy, but there's also the liftoff report from the Department of Energy. And my question is, has that been discussed with your committees? Because that has really changed this cost assumption that it's more expensive. In fact, the result of that, and I do have the executive copy here if you want to see it, was that renewables plus storage is more expensive than the combination of renewable storage and nuclear. So if we're using that as more expensive, we have to allow the industry to grow and the costs are going to come down, just like it did for solar and wind. If we froze solar and wind 20 or 30 years ago at their cost structure, it wouldn't be where it is now. But I would encourage you, if you haven't read that report, to look at that liftoff report about advanced nuclear, because it really changes that cost line if you think that it's more expensive in the long run. So I guess the question in there is, has that report been reviewed yet by the committees?
I have not read it. I'm very interested in reading it. That's exactly the kind of research we want to look at, and we would share it with the committee members and sort of get their take.
Thank you.
I'll take your answer.
Probably have time for one more, two more, one more.
All right, we had a question online about loss over transmission lines and if DERs are kind of a good solution to that, and what do you think of the state's role in encouraging those kind of build outs to avoid having to use gigantic transmission lines?
George, I got to admit, I did not get the first part of the question.
Totally whiffed that one there.
And I've
So
recently
there's a
learned-
question online about the power loss over long transmission lines and how distributed energy resources might be able to play a role in lessening the need for such long lines. So that's kind of one of the questions.
Go ahead, Patty. You ready to go?
Sure. Well, I think if we are utilizing solar energy closer to where it's generated, then you don't need to have the need for so much transmission lines. And I think that distributed energy can also make things more resilient, or make the grid more resilient, because not everybody is dependent on one power line and one source. So I think that distributed energy can be a very beneficial tool to reliability and to sustainability around our grid.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Nick. You're closer to the mic than I was.
Ditto. The whole country, really the world, sees the benefits of distributed energy. We're looking at the University of St. Thomas's microgrid stuff. There's no question there's upside. I guess we could debate how much upside. As far as, I think your question, George, included the loss of energy across the longer lines. That's a fact to be considered. It's a cost issue, and it's got some reliability issues as well. I don't see any state policy directly addressing that coming down the pike this session, but maybe we just haven't heard of it yet.
Well, I think, there used to be an old saying, a chicken in every pot, but I think there should be a wind turbine in every neighborhood too. And I think when it comes to distributed generation, when we're looking at, wind and how it affects the sight lines of rural Minnesota, I think there should also be those same sight lines affected in the metro. And, I believe that, from a distributed generation standpoint, having it closer to where the demand is an excellent option. And, you're seeing that with the data centers. They're putting their demand where the production is, right? So they're thinking opposite. And as state lawmakers, we need to be putting production where the demand is.
Maybe one more comment. As we talk about viewshed, one thing I remember from my city council days was you don't own your view. And so I'm not trying to say there shouldn't be input, but I think we need to recognize our rights should be determined on our property, and we should allow our neighbors to utilize their property in a way that fits within our regulatory system and our laws and statutes. But that's just...
I think Tim has a question, Greg. Sorry.
I was just going to quickly mention, I know we have about 5 minutes left, but we did have a couple of other questions come in, and people are texting me around, there seems to be bipartisan agreement around energy efficiency. What might that look like this upcoming session? And just maybe a very brief answer, and folks could follow up at the conclusion of the program.
In the Senate, I don't know that we have any specific proposals to increase the incentives for efficiency. The incentives speak for themselves for the ratepayer, for the company, and for the vendors. Very open to those. I think efficiency not only provides us the cost savings, but decreases our demand, which allows us to take advantage of additional capacity if we have it. A good example would be right now in Minnesota, partly due to our efficiency programs, these 3 data centers, which are already coming, we basically have the capacity generation for them already. So have not yet met a legislator who says, I want less efficiency.
We haven't talked about specifics, but open to it.
Last question.
Thanks to the panel. Briefly, Senator, you commented about the cost of climate change, and I'm also experiencing an increase in my homeowner's insurance, and the explanation is damages across the country. I get that. There's an International Chamber of Commerce report that has just been released in November that talks about trillions of dollars of global damage, and it's directly attributable to climate change. In this room, and for those listening, there are a lot of experts. There are solar installers, there are folks that are expert with batteries, and a whole host of distributed energy resources that could be more directly, more immediately deployed to begin solving this problem. We have some ideas about institutional barriers to DERs and all the great work folks are doing here. I'm wondering, from your perspective, what are the institutional barriers you see, whether it's the PUC or other issues within the governmental structure that is restricting the creative business capacity of solar installers and others who have expertise with DERs? How can we more quickly unleash their capabilities to solve this problem and grow businesses?
Well, I will say one of the things that we passed last year was the Solar App Plus bill to allow for local units of government, for applications for solar to be done in an online way that, as long as they fit within certain criteria. So I think that if we can help with eliminating some of the bureaucracy around applications and permits and to allow it to be deployed more quickly, I think that can be really beneficial. So that's just something that popped in. That's one example that I can think of.
Do you want any, Chris?
I'm good.
This is a great wrap-up for CEEM. You know, here's what I would say. We have to get to the same place on the facts. What is the cost of climate change? Again, you can say it's zero. You can say it's astronomical tomorrow. There is a truth there. Once the public can get together on that, we can have a healthy debate about the best ways to reduce the impacts. But our situation here is very simple. Everybody wants to go to heaven and nobody wants to die. We have a lot of humans on the planet, including in developing nations, who are like, are you kidding me, United States? You pollute this planet for 120 years, and now the pollution is coming home to roost, literally threatening the existence of our nation, and you won't help us with that? And the answer from Americans, a majority of Americans, yeah, I'm busy trying to put food on the table, roof over the head, and clothes on the back, and that's the human condition. Maybe someday giraffes will be in charge and it'll be easier.
They'll just be sticking their neck out, though.
Ah, good one.
Sorry. Oh, he said something about giraffes, and I said they really stick their neck out. So.
Yeah.
You could meet a bad
On that note, yeah. Thank you all for being here. I'll turn it over to CEEM again.
That was a great ending. Can we give a quick round of applause to our lovely panel? We can let them leave the stage, but can we also give a round of applause to our moderator for having some wonderful questions that really got us thinking? So we've made it. I think we learned a lot about what might be coming up on the upcoming legislative session. If Assistant Commissioner Hali Kolkind had to leave early, but she reaffirmed our commitment here in Minnesota to the clean energy transition. So we'll give her a quick round of applause as well. I know we've been thinking a lot about the future in 2025, but CEEM just wants to remind everyone of the great work that's already being done. We're really proud of the 62,000 jobs that are currently across the state, including quite a few in greater Minnesota. We're also really proud to say that zero carbon sources produce the majority of Minnesota's electricity for the 4th consecutive year. And we did a lot of great work in the legislature in the past few years as well. So can we please give a round of applause to ourselves for making all of these things happen? So if we are thinking about future events, I know I have to do a little plug. We have our Clean Energy Business Day on March 6th. So I encourage you to put that in your calendar. It's free, just like this event, but you actually get to meet even more legislators, and we'll have a rotunda program, we'll have a happy hour, and we generally have over 200 people. So that will be at the state capitol on the 6th. And before we wrap up, if you haven't already, I encourage you to join our newsletter. There's little QR codes right on your table to make it super easy, but that's how we can give you updates, news, and what's happening in this upcoming session. So we appreciate you being here. I realize we're about to kick you out pretty quick, so I'm sorry for that, but if you are interested in doing any networking, we have about 10 minutes. And have a great rest of your day and just have a wonderful holiday season.